Hello everyone, welcome to Comfort Food episode 11. Today I'm joined by two very special guests. They're both filmmakers who are active, I guess, in the Chicago area. I don't know. One's my roommate, and the other is a very good friend, Nick Borelli.
Hi, I'm Nick Borelli.
And and Blair, what's your? I don't know. Wait, how do I not know your last name?
I'm Blair Johnson, dude.
Johnson.
Blair Johnson.
I'm on Facebook.
Just like
with
Ashley
you.
Johnson, the actress who plays Ellie in The Last of Us.
Yeah, she's a great actress. I love her.
Yeah, she's amazing.
That's what we call one hell of a segue. So if you couldn't tell already by the title and what I just said, today we're gonna be talking all about The Last of Us. So I guess to just
The first
kind
one.
of. Yeah, the first one.
The first Last of
and
Us.
just as a precaution, we are going to be talking spoilers for a now 7-year-old game.
7 years.
We're old, Nick.
Right? And yeah, spoilers for that. We're not going to get into probably much, if anything, about the second one. Absolutely zero spoilers for Last of Us Part 2 because there will be a second episode of this show about it, I'm sure. But anyways, so either one of you, why don't you guys both tell us a little bit about your history with the series and kind of how you were introduced, well, not the series, but your history with this game, kind of how you were introduced to it, how you came across it, because I know, like, personally, like, I didn't really have much if any interaction with it until like a couple months ago.
Thanks to moi.
Yes.
I gave Charlie my copy so he could finally play it because he'd never played it before.
Why don't you go ahead, Nick, and talk about your history with this property?
Yeah. So I love Naughty Dog. I've loved Naughty Dog for a very long time. I played the Jak and Daxter trilogy as a kid, which Jak 2 is like known to be their first story in terms of what they're known for now. You know, people always make that joke about Naughty Dog being the Oscar bait of video games. Jak 2 is the first time they ever did like an Oscar bait style story in a video game. And I remember playing that trilogy as a kid, and they're good games. I actually replayed them like a year ago, and they're still fun. They still hold up. So if you're into weird 3D platformers that also have guns in them, Jak and Daxter trilogy, and then the Jak X, the fourth game that's a racing game for some reason, but is also really, really freaking good. Don't know how that happened, but it's great. And I love Naughty Dog for a long time. Obviously, I played the Uncharted games on PS3. Those games are a lot of fun. Loved Uncharted 4 after that came out. But I remember, this is a weird sentence. Last of Us came out when I graduated from middle school. Graduated 8th grade is when Last of Us came out. So I remember it came out, and my two close friends, Owen and John. John, who's a childhood friend of mine, and Owen, who is my writing partner whenever I work on anything film related. We for like a few nights in a row, like 4 or 5 nights, we just sat down, and the three of us just played the whole thing through. And I loved every second of it. And since then, I've replayed it 2 or 3 times. I think I've played the game 3 times through. The most recent of which was like a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm. And then you've also like kind of sort of watched me play through like the first half.
Yeah, when you at college, yeah, you played through. I was watching you play. I think I saw you play all of summer. And then
that sounds right.
Yeah, I think I saw you play all of summer.
Yeah, because it's divided into
Left
chapters
Behind
and stuff.
too.
Yeah.
So what about you, Blair? What's your kind of experience with it?
My experience of it was and I have a unique perspective here because it's a Sony exclusive, and I haven't owned a Sony console since like the PS2, so I watch the games. So I look at it from a purely narrative standpoint, and I watched Last of Us twice back when it came out because once was like, YouTube playthrough, look at me, oh god, look what's happening, I'm giving commentary. But the second time around, I was so fascinated with the game that I watched the full, like 12-hour whatever experience edited down. With the gameplay, just to know like all the background and the lore with the little notes and the environmental storytelling and stuff. And I was just, I like the Uncharted games, but Last of Us it got hype at the time, just being like, this is the best story game ever, is what people were saying. So I wanted to go in there and just really have like a nice skeptical perspective. And I was 15 at the time, so I was ready to be edgy, and I went in and I went out like, okay, no, that was very, very good, and I was affected. So um, I think I've maybe watched through part of it since, but not a whole lot of interaction since.
Well, what I think is interesting about both of you that I know but not everyone else listening and or watching does is that you're both pretty big fans of like the survival horror genre as a whole.
Yeah.
Like I know you guys are both big fans of like Resident Evil 4, which and Metal Gear Solid too, which to me are like kind of the two games that at least again to me are the probably the biggest influences as games on this.
Yeah,
on the
Last of Us is
Part
like
One.
if you made a Resident Evil, if you made a Metal Gear Solid game with zombies in the Uncharted engine.
Is he with us?
You cut out, so all I heard was Last of Us is like if you made a Metal Gear Solid game.
I said it's like if you made a Metal Gear Solid game with zombies using the Uncharted engine.
So you mean like Metal Gear 5 and the Uncharted engine?
I'm not going to dignify that with a response.
Not gonna dignify that with a response. Not gonna happen.
Oh, what a good game. Anyways, so my experience, I guess, just to fill this in, is that basically, when The Last of Us Part One came out, it was around the same time that, at least to me, zombie things like post-apocalyptic zombie stuff was like in full popularity. Like I would say at its height of popularity. We had The Walking Dead, Last of Us was killing it, all sorts of stuff like that. And it seemed and even in games, it felt like you couldn't like go anywhere without stepping in a washed out looking zombie game. And so I was kind of I'd barely consumed any media even related to like zombies or that kind of idea, because technically the enemies in Last of Us aren't zombies, but
Cordyceps.
They're crazy
But-
people with mushrooms on their heads.
so Mario. But basically, I avoided The Last of Us like the plague for that reason, and then also because it was during the Wii U era while I was 13, and when I was 13 during the Wii U era, I was like, oh my god, I have to like be a Nintendo fanboy, and I can't play games on other consoles or anything like that. So in fact, I never even owned a PlayStation until about not even a year ago.
Classic Charlie.
That's what?
Classic Charlie.
It's kind of like being a Hornets fan.
I'm not gonna play an amazing, critically acclaimed, like beloved game because Nintendo didn't make it.
Well, no, it wasn't on the Wii U. That's why. Because I also
What was?
I guess it was.
No, what was on the Wii U?
Oh. All the old games.
Nah, I'm kidding.
That's
Nah, I'm
about
kidding.
it.
Shoutouts to the Wii U guys.
Man, that was even before Mario Kart 8 and Smash were on it. What did I even play on it? But actually, no, that was back when I was still playing Black Ops 2 multiplayer all the time. But oh man, I completely lost my train of thought. Oh, and then and this is also kind of before I paid attention to game reviews, before I was really following the industry. It took me another like 2 or 3 years before I was like really in tune with that. So when games got review scores, I had no idea unless it was like a 10 or like a 3.
And now some would argue that's
Because-
all the reviews are.
Well,
I disagree. I disagree. Just put it on record.
That's
I
what
disagree.
The
I think
Metacritic
people just
reviews for
don't
Last
read
of Us
reviews.
Part 2 are.
But
Yes, I agree with that. But yeah, so I kind of never really got into it, and I obviously really hadn't played many cinematic games, like on the same caliber as like an Uncharted or Last of Us, and about this time last year, maybe a little bit later, I was like, all right, it's time for me to get a PS4. For once since I've started college, I have financial stability, and So, I already had an Xbox One and a Switch and a PC. So I was like, for once I'll have all the gaming platforms. So I picked up a PS4, and then fast forward a couple months, I'm living with Nick, and he installs like God of War, Last of Us, Spider-Man, what were some other
You're
ones?
so welcome.
Battlefront 2. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Even though I bought God of War and Spider-Man like 2 weeks after we got back, after we went into quarantine. But
yeah, that kind of threw a wrench in the plan.
It did. But yeah, so then that's ultimately how I started playing Last of Us. Was I accidentally hit the X button to open it up on the PS4 menu one time when I was mad at Castlevania. What a weird sentence that is. But yeah, so that's kind of how I started, and it kind of just grabbed me and didn't really let go because I was very interested and captivated by it.
I accidentally played The Last of Us for the first time because I got frustrated playing Castlevania, and I accidentally opened Last of Us.
Yep. Games journalists are bad at video games, Nick.
I just wanted to make sure I had the story straight.
It's the perfect love
there.
story, man.
I was there. You're right.
Maybe.
I was definitely on the couch.
I would. Well, I don't know if I go so far as to say it was a perfect love story. I got mad at Joel pretty quickly. I kept calling him a shitty Nathan Drake, even though I never played Uncharted.
Joel's a.
But anyways, what to you guys like? Obviously, you kind of mentioned like what's so special about The Last of Us to both of you, but so Blair, I'm genuinely curious. So, as someone who's never played a single frame of it, from my understanding, what do you think of the game? Like what is your critical analysis? What are your critical thoughts about it?
Well, my critical analysis of The Last of Us is something that is interesting because, as you said, I've never played it, but it seems like they make an effort to address kind of that. What's the infamous term for it? Oh, ludonarrative dissonance. They make an effort to kind of
Wait,
address that with
dude, did you know that there's an achievement in Uncharted 4 called ludonarrative dissonance, and it's for like killing 1,000 people?
I love that. I love that so. That's the best thing I've ever heard in my life.
Dude, that was the best when I got that platinum. Oof.
And the sound design for the game was what stuck out to me first because obviously it's made to be very realistic and especially with the violence and but just the atmosphere and everything. Because I did hear the game obviously even though I didn't play it and that stuck out to me. Obviously the visuals were great. But I look at this game purely from a narrative perspective and I consider the gameplay to be part of the narrative because that affects the pacing and a lot of what's happening on screen is
Right,
through
it's
gameplay.
still
It's kind of
still a video
expression.
game.
Exactly. It's a video game, right?
Yeah.
So to me, Last of Us brings up a lot of interesting questions and makes a lot of interesting observations and has a great perspective that I think comes from a great place in the heart. And I won't say anything about two, but I really enjoy the thesis of Last of Us.
And so, what to you is the thesis?
It is that through unconventional bonds or new bonds, we can overcome kind of our past trauma, abandonment, and kind of the things that have kept us held back. I think
Mm.
The Last of Us, in its perspective on a world without human dominance, is something that gives a unique opportunity, not just to make pop culture references that go like, "Ah, I know what that is. So funny," it's like how would a kid that grew up after human dominance see the world? And it allows for this really interesting perspective where we question basic things and it gives us perspective on our relationships and why we do things and aspects like tribalism and trust in other people and even obligation toward each other on a basic human level is something that are
Mm.
things that I think are gone into very well. Like, what are we obligated to do for the next person? And that's something that's gone into very often in zombie media. But I
Yeah.
think this game in particular and its human relationships are very
Hmm.
effective at exploring just the base aspects of human interaction.
Well, I think what you said specifically about what we do for the people after us is kind of the again, I warned you all about spoilers already. It's kind of the crux of the final decision when Joel chooses to save Ellie, and I think it's interesting that you have to make the decision to save Ellie. Like, it's your only option.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you keep dying. But seeing that happen and seeing the ways that Joel makes those decisions, it kind of I forget who I heard saying this. I think it was like Greg Miller or someone on a podcast the other day talking about Last of Us and Last of Us Part 2 was like the realization that maybe you're not the good guy here. Like you're not some morally perfect human being who's like, oh, I'm gonna go save the princess and defeat the great evil or whatever. And obviously, that had been done and is being done and was being done all the time in video games. But I think the way that The Last of Us does it and lets that decision hit you at the end when Ellie, when Ellie's like, are you telling me the truth? And then Joel kind of like explains himself, and she's just like, okay.
Yeah.
I just want to say that Blair, I like your
cut out
answer.
just when he was about to say something.
Yeah, I like your answer, Blair. It's a smart answer, well worded, just like a writer. I think I disagree with your thesis.
Uh-huh.
Because I don't think The Last of Us is that optimistic. Because I don't think Joel actually overcomes anything, and that's kind of the point.
I can definitely see that. I think it's Ellie's story, though.
It is Ellie's story, and she definitely becomes. I don't want to say she becomes a better person, but she becomes stronger as a person through the story. But Joel has what we call in the screenwriting business a negative arc, where instead of having a character flaw that drives all his actions through the story until he inevitably overcomes it and does something, that goes against that flaw at the end. He has a character flaw, and by the end, he has fully succumbed to it and let it consume his entire life. Mm-hmm. He is so distant from everyone, and he's so lonely because of how he lost his daughter, that he's so cold to Ellie throughout the entire game, and that he finally opens up. He finally opens up and lets her get close to him, and you think it might be a change for the better, and you realize that it's a selfish obsession.
Yeah.
And it's not really much more than that. He's doing it purely for himself and not for anyone else. And as much as he wants to lie to himself that it's to protect Ellie,
and that's an interesting idea. Yeah.
It's all for him because he wants a daughter.
Okay, this is my perspective on that, because I love the ending of this game because it's not a moral question as much as it is a personal question, in my opinion. When you experience it, the first thing I ask is, what would I do? And my opinion, getting like really philosophical about it, is that Joel in that instance was acting as himself. And we get to a point where we feel so emotionally powerful about something, and we are so dictated by the composure of who we are that the actions that we take, we know that they're wrong, yet we can't be anything other than ourselves. I think he got put in a situation that was so specific, and I think he was shameless about that, and I do agree with that, and he doesn't feel enough shame or regret about it, but I do understand his decision on a base level.
Oh, absolutely.
Because he felt incapable of doing anything else.
Well, that's what makes the writing of the game so good. You get to that point and you're not, I don't think you're shocked that Joel like kills them and takes Ellie. It's not shock. It's a resigned like, Joel's gonna kill everyone. Like you're genuine. You're more afraid than anything. You're like, I'm gonna have to kill all the good people, or the morally gray people, and stop this potential like help to the world, because that's what Joel wants and that's what he's wanted the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, no, I kind of fall in between both of you in terms of what I feel like that game is about, and I think, this is something that I've developed over the past like week and a half of just like listening to podcasts, reading articles, going on Twitter and reading takes and stuff, and hearing, what people think, and I think I'm increasingly of the mind that it's about the bad things you would do for the people you love.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And and I think, you know, you see time and time again Joel making those decisions because you are primarily playing as Joel until Ellie and Joel have that connection, and then Ellie is doing those things for Joel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to say the other thing that I've always thought that the game, sorry, always is the wrong thing. This is something I noticed on my most recent playthrough from like a year and a half ago.
I'm sorry?
Something I noticed my most recent time playing through the game is that I understand that it's obvious that, you know, the crutch of Joel's story is fatherhood and what fatherhood can do to a person, what losing a child could possibly be like, how terrible that is, and what it means to be a father in a terrible situation. And I realized on my recent playthrough that every season of the game, every like side character you meet in some way is a different type of parental figure that are all warning. They're all warning Joel in some way of the route he's going down.
Yeah. That's a great observation about how characters in this game have their time on the journey. Like when I was first experiencing the game, I saw the character. I believe her name is Tess, right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I saw
Joel's partner.
yeah, his interest, his boo thing. Tess in the beginning, I thought, is this character really going to stick with us? This character is kind of like very limited, I think, in the way that she was written. Not a whole lot of complexity to her. So when she, and sorry, audience, if you haven't played the game, when she dies, when she passes away onto the next realm, I realized that that's a part of him in his past that he's leaving behind. But and on a thematic level, I feel like he's moving past his smuggling roots, and this has become a completely different mission. This is about more than guns now. Now that she's gone and the stakes have improved. However, those same instincts of smuggling, as those go down, this kind of toxic fatherhood emerges, and we still see this person that is extremely desperate to like feel alive, since he lost the thing that made him feel alive.
The real tragedy of Tess is that you know that if it was the other way around, Tess would have sacrificed Ellie to save everyone. That's the thing. It's that's kind of the dramatic irony. If you replay the game, the kind of dramatic irony of it is that the wrong person died on the mission.
Yeah.
Because it was Tess's mission, not Joel's.
Exactly.
And if Tess carried it through, everything would have been different.
So, Nick, something that I wanted to ask you about, I did want to ask Blair about it, but I genuinely didn't know that you'd never played it. So, Nick, one of your favorite games of all time is Metal Gear Solid 3.
Right.
Another one of your favorite games of all time is any of the various Resident Evil games.
Right. Charlie's favorite. Metal Gear Solid 3 and old Resident Evil games.
Ooh, yeah, I fucking love them.
They're comfort food.
But
dude, Resident Evil's my cover food. I fucking love Resident Evil.
So Nick, because one of the biggest complaints I see is that the gameplay doesn't feel good. The gunplay feels
For Last of Us?
bad. In The Last of Us specifically, yeah. And I'm like very slowly drawing a comparison here,
Okay.
but you know, people compare it to something like Resident Evil 4 or something like a Metal Gear Solid 3, where, you know, the stealth doesn't feel quite right or the gunplay doesn't feel as good, you know, that kind of thing. And you know, like, I'm just curious how you feel about the gameplay and what your response to some of the complaints about the gameplay, and not just the ones that I listed, but just general stuff, you know, from like in the combat to all the QTEs to you know, swimming over different pallets for Ellie to stand on.
The game's version of puzzles. I actually, okay, I'm in the camp of, I really think that, like, Last of Us has a story that is maybe one of my favorite, if not my favorite, video game stories ever told. And on the gameplay side of it, I think the gameplay is good, not great, but has great levels. And I think that I think if you play, I've played a lot of video games, and a lot of the video games that I've played have really shitty controls. And, like, I can't believe I'm saying this, maybe for the first time in my life, not as a brag. As someone who's beaten Dark Souls, which is a game that controls like garbage, but is part of the fun of it, and almost feels...
I'm glad this doesn't have comments.
It almost feels deeply intentional that it plays like garbage. With how everything in that game is designed, there is a certain argument to be made about kind of floaty, imprecise controls being part of the survival horror element of it. Because that's the whole thing with Resident Evil 4, which is known as now as like one of the classic pinnacles of survival horror video games. Like, that game doesn't control great, but it's because it's supposed to feel tense when things are moving in on you. Like, if you can't move while you're shooting, you have to plan when you're going to shoot. And Last of Us doesn't do that, but it does do kind of like, it does the whole very little ammo, especially on like the hardest difficulty. You get nothing. Like, you get basically nothing. Kind of floaty aim that you can't really steady that well. And I think it works. I've never found it annoying, but it's not something that couldn't be improved upon. It definitely could. And I've heard that 2 improves upon it. I hope it does.
That what improves upon it?
2. I would hope that after 7 years it was a little better.
Yeah, it's a natural progression, right. I think.
But honestly, I don't think the game is like annoying or a chore to play. Like, if it was, I would. If it was and I wanted to re-experience it, I would just watch the cutscenes. But I'm genuinely like, I can't find a reason if I ever replay the game not to just play the game. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I would say I'm in the same camp as you, where I well, in terms of the gameplay at least, I really, I played this game in between when I first played a demo of Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 4, and then when I actually like played Resident Evil 4 and played Resident Evil 2 Remake. Because when I first tried playing the demo of Resident Evil 2 Remake, I was like, "Oh my god, this game controls like garbage." I was just mad. I was like, I was viscerally upset. Yeah, I was viscerally upset at controlling Leon in that demo, and going into Last of Us, I was a little relieved, to be honest. The movement felt a little bit more forgiving, and I think that's also partially because it's more stealth related than Resident Evil. But the movement felt a little better, so to me it felt like a better, I think for me it was a much better gateway into survival horror, because again, I'm someone who grew up and still generally prefers and puts gameplay above everything else, and that includes movement and how a game controls. And I think that's largely because like most of my formative years playing games were all spent playing Mario Galaxy and Smash and Street Fighter and things that are very precise in their motions and in their controls. So then playing something like Resident Evil 2 Remake as my intro to survival horror was like repelled me like crazy. Like I was just like, no, I'm good. I'm out of here.
That game does rule though.
No, I played it earlier this year, and I borrowed Nick's copy actually, and I quite enjoy that game now.
Once you get used to it, like what it's trying to do, it's a fun game.
Yeah. You cut out again.
It's okay. The waveform's on my screen. You'll hear it.
Okay. Okay. Good. The wave. Yeah.
You'll hear it in post.
But basically, what I was trying to get to basically is I don't think I'm necessarily as high on the story as either of you are, and I think part of that is because I have the benefit of playing it, or well, not necessarily the benefit, the drawback of playing it 6 years after it came out.
After you've heard various things and various expectations and
honestly, going in, I don't think I had very high expectations, because I expected a story and not much else.
Look at me,
I was impressed by the gameplay.
Look at me, I'm Charlie. I didn't hear that The Last of Us was great before I played it. I just thought it was a Telltale game.
I I mean, I had heard of it, but like, I knew people liked it, but I was never like, I gotta play this game,
Right.
and I was never spoiled on it. I never had somehow I've never been spoiled on that.
Yeah, I was shocked.
Like
I was genuinely
Bioshock.
shocked.
Yeah.
7 years.
Actually, I don't
7
think-
years, and like the most at this point most well-known modern narrative game, you didn't know what happened in it.
Come to think of it, I don't think I knew any major narrative beat, not just the ending,
Right.
but the beginning, the end. Like, I didn't even know the reason why Joel and Ellie worked together in the first place, or why Joel was taking Ellie somewhere.
Wow.
And so I went in with pretty low expectations because I was like, oh, it's just another Sony exclusive with a sad dad who doesn't have a good relationship with their child.
Oh my god.
Yeah, they really do like that.
I think, all jokes aside, I think that is, no jokes aside, actually, I think that is a hilarious and awful generalization that people make about those games, but also...
Yeah, but also
The dads are pretty sad, man.
It's
You
like-
gotta admit, they're not
dude, all
happy.
the dads
Yeah.
are so sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Heavy Rain, God of War, Last of Us. But yeah, no. So I went in with super
Ratchet
low
and Clank.
expectations, and I found that I wasn't as big of a fan of the story as I was of the gameplay.
Wow.
I really like the gameplay. I just want to say, I just
Yeah,
want to
no,
say
me
that.
too.
Like, that's what I'm saying. That's why I play it every time. I think it's a good video game. Like, like I think the story's great, and I find the story more interesting. I love to talk about it, but I do think it's a very Naughty Dog makes good stuff. Like, I think it's well designed.
Yeah.
It's extremely polished. I can even tell that it's extremely polished, and I didn't hold it in my hands. But yeah, every single aspect of it is polished to me. That I could
Yeah,
experience.
and I think, obviously, like, again, I have the luxury of judging it 6 years after it came
Right.
out. I guess it technically got a remaster a little bit later, but
it
whatever.
holds up a lot
But-
better than a lot of games from 2013,
Yes.
2014.
Yes, absolutely. Especially because that's like the peak era when I said this earlier, but like The Last of Us was not alone in being a game with like a lot of washed out colors
Yeah.
and like zombies and stuff, and Last of Us plays probably better than most, if any of
Yeah.
them,
Washed out colors.
in my opinion.
It's an interesting term to describe it.
Well, okay. Sorry.
You're forgetting
Lots
about
of
you're forgetting
grades.
about the leaves, Charlie.
Oh yeah, and the giraffes and
Yeah.
nature's healing. We are the virus.
Yeah,
my
you
bad.
forgot about that. Freaking 2020, 7 years ahead.
Yeah.
Dude, Last of Us just
my
takes place in
bad.
2020.
Wait. Does
I
it?
actually don't know if it does. It could.
No, actually, I'm 100% certain it doesn't, because, and this is not a spoiler, but in The Last of Us Part 2, there are PS3s, so that means it takes place in 2013-ish.
Oh.
Well, yeah.
Thanks for
the
thanks for
beginning of the
spoil-
Outbreak Day.
thanks for
Outbreak Day
spoiling that for
happened
me.
in 2013-ish.
Yeah.
And you can't shoot them, by the way. I tried. It's really funny.
Oh, Outbreak Day happened in 2013, so the first game takes place in 2033.
Right.
Yep.
Huh. That was a long silence. Did you feel that?
Yeah,
Well,
no,
because I couldn't tell if you cut out, to be honest.
I think we all thought the other person was about to say something.
yeah, I was like,
I have a thing if we need a thing.
Okay, what's the thing?
I wanted to say that I think that as someone who has consumed, I'm not alone in this, but as someone who has consumed a ton of zombie media in my life, and like as from like classics to modern stuff, I think that Last of Us, I don't want to say it's the best, but I think it's on the Mount Rushmore of zombie storytelling in that I'm not saying that anything or everything in Last of Us is purely original or never been done before, but I think it takes basically every zombie trope and does it better than I've seen it done elsewhere. It's basically it's basically a story compiled of the basic framework of most zombie stories, especially ones that are set with like familial relationships and found family, which is what most zombie movies are about. And does them in such interesting and well written and well convulsed ways, mostly because Joel and Ellie are amazing characters. Like above all
Sensation.
else, like aside from you could criticize like the dialogue or some of the dialogue or story beats or whatever, I think the characters are basically flawless. And their
They're amazing.
performances behind them are so good that it makes everything awesome.
Yep. And you definitely have a point about like both things, because I think that the zombies or the cordyceps concoctions in this game, um, what they represent just as a thing to me, like in part, is something that separates. And I've said this, earlier in this. It separates humans from their dominance. It brings things to a simple place. They are the other, but they're not human. So
Right.
it's almost like that sense of other that we assign to each other is almost like broken down to a basic level, because all of that complexity is taken away, and you just have this thing that causes us to just have to survive. And that seems really obvious for zombie media, but a lot of zombie media, I think, honestly focuses a little too much on the zombies as an aspect, when I think Last of Us really understands to focus on the people and the world itself. And I think the setting of Last of Us Part 1, especially Last of Us Part 1 does this great, is that the setting is very much, it's useful in its storytelling. And like the factions, the Fireflies, the government, the independent provinces, the quarantine zones, I think all of the lore and all of the setting is compelling and adds to the story. I mean, you
Yeah.
start the game in one of these quarantine zones, and you establish Joel as this character that is a product of where he is. And as he explores, his perspective changes, and especially Ellie's perspective changes. So I think that setting and that Naughty Dog sense of expanse is really well used in this game.
I'd agree.
Hmm.
I think the environmental storytelling is excellent. But Naughty Dog's
So
usually very good at that.
I actually about environmental storytelling. That's actually something I want to get into, because I want to hear both of your takes about how. Firstly, I mean, obviously, you did both say like a little bit about it, but firstly, what would each of you define and or describe environmental storytelling like as? Like, what to you is environmental storytelling? And secondly, like, how do you think it is, like, quality quality wise, like, how do you think it is utilized in The Last of Us?
You want to go, Nick?
Mm,
Either one.
Okay, environmental storytelling in a video game, there's like different approaches to it, right? And I love
Mm.
Bethesda, but it's not just like, oh, check it out. There's like a bone in a toilet. That must be a story, And like that's not what environmental storytelling is.
Okay, wait a minute. Is that an actual
Yeah,
example?
that happens.
A
Oh
lot.
my
That's a
There's a
fall,
lot
god.
of
that's a Fallout. That's a Fallout joke.
There's a project, and environmental storytelling comes in many forms, but it's like the crafting of the environment to reflect not only the story but the setting, and I guess certain aspects of environmental storytelling has to be the interactability of it, right? So,
Mm.
like you could say that notes being left around are environmental storytelling, but there's also like just straight up visual storytelling,
Mm.
um, you know, nonverbal aspects to the story progression, like your actions have you know uh, you know effects on the environment around you. That's environmental storytelling. And so qualitatively in The Last of Us, I personally don't mind having to like scrub for lore and like look around and see notes and stuff like that, even if it's not completely realistic that everybody holds a diary of their last moments alive.
Right. So you've read all the books in Skyrim, is what I'm hearing.
Only the Argonian made one, my friend. But but with Last of Us, I find that number one, it rewards you for reading them because you really get a sense of the world, and some of them connect to one another, and you start piecing things together. But on top of that, I think just the way that they literally like designed the environments and what they look like reflect when things stopped, when things started again, and how different areas have reflected their sense of progress in that restarting of humanity process. It feels
Hmm.
extremely authentic in terms of humanity stopped at some point. It really does feel frozen. Like places are looted, but there are some places that are less looted. There are some places that are rebuilt, but there are some places that look like, this is like a freaking weird Planet of the Apes, like we're almost there to New Society level, and then there's some where it's just like, yo, this is like down the street, except everything's dead.
Yeah, you got PS3s in your home consoles, but it's 2027
Right.
or 2037 rather.
So I think it does well.
Blair, I totally agree with your answer. I going off of what you're saying, I think the key to environmental storytelling in video games, and also semi-applicable, if not entirely applicable to film, is presenting your world as lived in. You're letting your audience down if it feels like everything that's happening purely exists for the story that's being told. Like, them entering this place is the first time anything important has ever happened there. And I still think, and I don't know, I feel like Charlie's going to have a hot take and disagree with me here. I still think the king of environmental storytelling in video games is still BioShock 1. I don't think a game has done environmental storytelling better than that game has to this day. Like, the audio logs are super interesting, obviously, and they do a great job. But even if you don't listen to any of them, I feel like every freaking room in BioShock, you walk in and you go, oh, I get a vibe of who was here, like who frequented this place, what this is like, what the scene was like here. Like, I feel like I know so much about Rapture, having like never lived there.
Like the woman with the stroller.
Yeah, the one with the stroller is a great bit. And Last of Us, I think, does a good job. I think it. I'm having trouble remembering outstanding examples, but I do remember playing the game and feeling like, oh, like this is a home where people lived. This is a lot of the suburb stuff. I think is really, really good. In particular, when you go through the suburb section of Summer and you get to go through all those houses, and there's just kind of all these kinds of really nice details. That being said, something I will never get over and never not joke about when playing The Last of Us. Why did everyone take their spoons with them? You go into any kitchen in The Last of Us and you search for supplies and you open the drawers and all the drawers are empty. Why did everybody take their silverware?
Currency. Yeah.
They can melt it down, make bullets.
Everybody,
weapons.
every single person took their silverware with them.
The difference between us and the animals, Nick, is the fact that we don't eat with our hands.
But everyone in the post-apocalypse eats with their hands.
Just at last.
Does that mean that humans are the real villains and that everyone is an animal?
Yes.
There's no difference. It's just otherism.
That's what Neil Druckmann was saying. Also, I made it. I don't know if this. I don't know if either of you care about this. I made a realization about Last of Us the other day because my brother's replaying Witcher 3, and it led to a stupid train of thought I went down that made me mad at myself. But I like being right about things. Not talking about plot, talking purely about story. Witcher 3 and Last of Us have the same story. They're both about grizzled father figures with tragedy rated.
Whoa! No spoilers, please.
This isn't a spoiler. It's just basic,
okay, cool.
Basically what the game's setting you up for is they're both about jaded father figures who have tragedy laden pasts who have to come to terms with familial figures and what it means to be the role model or to be in charge of someone.
I've never played Witcher 3 because, and this is going to sound really petty, I played it for a little bit and I'm like, do black people not exist here? And I got a little irritated and I just stopped playing. I was just like, I don't know. There's just no people of like any sort of color. So I just didn't feel like thinking about that all the time and I just stopped playing.
I feel like that's not a petty reason. I feel like that's a much greater, it's a much better reason than I could give for why I stopped playing Witcher 3. Which was I looked at it about 10 hours in and went, this is too big, and I stopped.
Video games are too long, Nick.
They are.
They're
all way too long.
Discourse. Modern discourse about art.
I do have a take
So,
on that, but I feel like Charlie wants us to stay on topic.
No, actually, I don't. I was telling this to Blair, like, while we were in the call when you weren't here, but, yeah, I don't really care if we go too far off topic. Worst case scenario, I have to do, like, an extra hour or something of editing. I'm totally okay with that, but, I just want to... Oh, no, I forgot what I was going to squeeze in before you said that, but go for it.
Okay. Let me know if you think of it and stop me. I just think, in terms of that argument, I think that I see a lot of people being like, video games are too long, and then responding with like, no, all video games should be long. And I really think it's just a simple situation of video games can both be short and really long. Like, it's really great to play a game like a Bethesda game and like get enraptured in something for like 50 to 70 hours or whatever, and it's also really fun to sit down and play an entire game in one afternoon. I feel like it's just different moods and different tones. I think more of the issue is I think too many games are being forced to be long. Like, too many games are being forced and stretched out into open world things when they'd be better as singular experiences.
That's actually, the forcing open worlds into things specifically is something that I'm like, that's like really something that's relevant. I don't want to get too far into it again, but this is like not a spoilery thing, but Last of Us Part 2, in my opinion, has far too many open areas. Again, this is like me. It has open areas put in the worst possible places, and it really breaks the pacing of the story in the game. And I feel that way about a lot of games that I have played, where sometimes games that do not need open world nonlinear structure have it, and it's so derailing to me. But I know I'm in the minority there.
I mean, I haven't played it yet. I'm very excited to, for better or worse. I'm just excited to experience it.
It's an experience, like,
and
it's
feel what I
definitely
feel
worth
what I feel about
experience.
it. And I'm sure we'll have plenty of conversations when I finally do. But Film Crit Hulk, who is a wonderful film writer, who writes amazing and brilliant and beautiful analytical pieces about TV and movies and sometimes video games and all kinds of things. I would highly recommend him if you're at all interested in really interesting takes on popular media. He tweeted the other day. He tweeted like a few days ago, "I'm finally playing Last of Us 2. I'll let you know how it goes." And then, like, yesterday, he tweeted at, like, 2 a.m., "How is this game not over yet?" And those are the only two things he's tweeted about Last of Us 2. So I'm kind of excited for whatever inevitable piece he writes about it.
Yeah, I love his character bios, or his character bio article. I actually use that as the basis for my own outline. So
Yeah, that's a
he's so good with character and stuff like that.
Yeah, he's great. Shout-outs to Film Crit Hulk.
Shout out.
You're doing great work over there, man.
Yes, Film Crit Hulk, I know you're listening.
Yeah, that's why I said shout-out, because I know that he's a fan of yours.
Yeah, well, who wouldn't be?
He's also a foodie. He does like cooking stuff. He really likes cooking, Charlie.
Yeah, kindred soul.
So you guys are basically the same in my
follower. Mind. Yeah, well, what can I say? I do have the best takes about everything.
I feel like he probably talks like you do. Not gonna lie. Just about film instead of food.
Film instead of
food.
What? Oh, well, that's disappointing.
I haven't known Charlie enough to know. Is he like a Ratatouille level food lover? Is that his vibe? Is that like, because I know he likes eating weird stuff.
Charlie?
Yeah.
Well, as I tweet, did you see my birthday tweet to Charlie?
I did, actually.
That's who Charlie is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I'm going back on topic for like 2 seconds, but I think Last of Us Part 1 is, like, in my opinion, a very good length, not only for a AAA game, but for a narrative game in particular.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I think, somewhere anywhere between, like, the length of something like Last of Us and God of War, which is also like, God of War is a little bit more gameplay focused, I would say, than Last of Us. Like, moment to moment, you're doing a little bit more in God of War, which kind of makes it easier to extend that experience. But I think, generally, narrative games that are very long, that try to fit the narrative into the amount of time for the entire time that you're expected to play the game, or almost always end up feeling uh, overdrawn and bloated. And I think that's something that The Last of Us Part 1 in particular is not. And then you turn around and you look at something like, well, I think GTA 5 is one of the few exceptions to that rule, to that take. But I think even GTA 5, that story starts getting a little long in the tooth before it starts picking up for its conclusion. But then, something like Breath of the Wild, best game ever made, slap that on the box. Basically, I think that like that game is like 100 hours long if you play the way that you're expected to. But while the narrative is there, it's not a primary focus.
Right.
And I think that's the difference between like what length a game should be, in my opinion. But
I think with The Last of Us, and people, I don't know if they say this anymore, but people used to have a problem with cinematic games. Like that would be like kind of like something that would be looked down upon.
There's
But I think Last of Us,
there's still kind of a bit of a there's still kind of on the, especially in the older crowd, the people who grew up with like NESs through N64s, me excluded. But the correct age group to play that stuff, I feel like there's definitely more of a stigma towards like, let me just play a video game instead of a story.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's more an issue of like, look into the things you're buying before you buy them.
Yeah, I think Last of Us though is a perfect example of taking the cinematic structure and applying it to a game, and it works. There we go.
yeah,
Like it's a well structured game. It literally is divided by seasons, and like the character arcs are structured very much more in a filmic way. So I know cinematic doesn't like refer to that, but it's more written and more similar to that of like a movie.
well, I think what's interesting to me is I've like kind of read a lot about this, and I've kind of like developed my own thoughts about this. But to me, I think Last of Us being placed in his like historically where it is, in terms of like the kind of game it is, and technically like from a technical and gameplay level, is a natural evolution of video games. You look at something like there's a story behind Space Invaders, and then that evolves to Pitfall, and that evolves to Donkey Kong, which evolves to Super Mario Bros, which evolves to Legend of Zelda, which evolves to Sonic the Hedgehog. It's consistently developing a story, and every time you progress through the world, more and more details are being divulged, more and more story is becoming a focus.
This just
in
in,
Mario
Charlie
you're just
only
jumping
knows
on
Nintendo
mushrooms.
games.
But all of a sudden in Sonic you're destroying robots and little animals come out, right? And even though that's such a small difference from numbers becoming animals,
It is a difference.
that's only like a 6-year difference. So imagine I forget what the very first video game is called, but it's like an asteroid shooting game. It's not asteroids though. Imagine what that like 50-year difference between that game and Last of Us can create, where you see, between Sonic the Hedgehog and Last of Us, you see stuff like Skyrim. You see stuff like Final Fantasy VII. You see stuff like Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
And so I think the problem that people have with cinematic games is a like Nick was kind of hinting at, it's more of an adherence to things of old rather than a valid criticism, in my opinion, because Mario in its day was a cinematic game. Final Fantasy VII in its day was a cinematic game. And you even look at the progression of franchises that people traditionally see as gameplay focused, and you see that, like, it's a kind of tired joke about how Sonic's, like, everything about Sonic has the gameplay of Sonic has consistently gotten worse, but everything else about it has gotten like somewhat better.
Right.
And so I think
Yeah, Sonic kissing a
that-
human woman was a step in the right direction. Narratively, I think.
well, yeah, that's peak Ludo narrative storytelling.
That's a little too progressive, Johnny.
Yeah, they got a little too much better, and they had to dial it back.
That's true, but that again, the exchange for that was that nothing else in that game
Has
worked.
anyone here actually played Sonic 06?
No.
I'm sure you have.
Yeah, I have.
Aww.
Yeah, played a little bit.
Yeah,
It's
that's what I
awful.
thought. All right. Well, I think we are about at the part of the show where we kind of talk about different people's takes and different people's happy memories and associations with various franchise with whatever we're talking about, and we've gotten a lot of replies, some definitely some hot takes in
I see
here.
one saying not playing it. What?
That's our roommate TJ.
Did you send this somewhere?
He's not gonna play it.
Did you send this to us somewhere?
It's on Twitter.
Gotcha.
It's all on Twitter, but so I go on Twitter for every episode, and I ask for people to reply with positive memories or associations or takes that they have about whatever we're talking about, and and I want to read this one because it's just funny, and it totally fits this person. Nick and my future roommate Sky Dingle at Flippity D says, that time where I went to my friend's house and he was playing it and I said, can I give it a try? And then after 30 minutes I said, this is fucking boring. And he said, yeah. And then we played Super Monkey Ball 2 and it was fun.
I mean, you're lost. Like, that's all I'm saying.
But previous guest and absolutely future guest and friend of the show, Isaiah Colbert, that's at I, like the body part I, ZEHUHH, says, I'd have to say that the gradual progression of being hyper capable as Joel to the point of noticing the stark difference between him and Ellie. The ending of the game echoes that of Children of Men, but in the opposite direction of what the main character does. Brilliant.
Isaiah out here with the Children of Men comparisons.
I mean,
I don't disagree.
I like one thing about Joel that's interesting is that he starts the game as this enforcer, and obviously Ellie is somebody that grows. So I do think that I completely agree with that, and that the transfer to Ellie makes you feel a little more desperate. But I'm wondering what you guys think. Like, what does that say? What is that switch supposed to like thematically mean? Getting on a deeper level of it.
I think one of the most fascinating things about the game is the mini arc within it about how at the beginning of the game, and they keep hinting at it, and then they kind of directly state it. Joel does not want Ellie to ever have to kill someone.
Right.
There's this idea where Joel is like, as soon as you kill someone for the first time, you can never go back. And I don't want to taint Ellie that way because the little bit of humanity that's left inside me doesn't want her to have the same life. Doesn't want her to have the same life as he did. And there's the point where Ellie kills a dude to save Joel, and he doesn't greet it with gratitude or understanding. He's pissed about it. And I think what's so cool is that through line they have of Ellie getting more and more like savage about things. Like, there's probably my favorite scene in the entire game when she's kidnapped by David and she bites his finger and goes, you can tell them my name's Ellie and I'm the 14-year-old that just bit your fucking finger.
Wow.
Which is such a good scene. And then you play as Ellie and you're faster and more nimble, but everything you do is slower and a struggle. Like, killing dudes as Ellie takes longer in the game than it does as Joel because it wants you to feel weaker and like scared and alone. But by the end of the game, Ellie has like become almost corrupted in this way into the killer she has to be to survive in this world. The irony, of course, being it didn't have to be that way, because if Joel followed through on what he was supposed to do, Ellie would have died to save everyone else.
Mm-hmm. Something that this is kind of related to, like the whole like playing as Ellie and that shift, and like the story and what it means, like at least to me, and in playing with the themes of the game, but I think it also shows like not just character progression in Ellie's capability, but the fact that she's willing to do this for someone.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially for Joel, who, she was kind of she and Joel were not happy
Yeah,
about being
yeah.
paired
She's
up.
not a fan. She's not a fan of the beginning, but she's also not a fan of anyone.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Character arc. Ooh.
But yeah, I think that's at least that's like one of my favorite things about like the use of that thing to kind of progress with the narrative and character development. Um, Another one from Twitter. This is Kudo at Victory Fanfares. That's one word, no caps, no spaces. He says, I played it for an entire weekend with my little sister the week before I went away to college in 2013. Simpler times, man.
Mm.
That's a good. That's got to be a good memory. Yeah, it's a.
I mean,
You go, Blair.
I was saying like, we told our ages, but is there any like special sentimentality to you based off of like the situation that you were in when you were playing it?
I just, I was actually. This is funny. I was talking about this the other day with Owen, as I just remember like. I kind of associate Last of Us with an almost simpler, like a genuinely simpler time in my life where I could just for several days straight have the same friends over, and we all play the same game together and experience it, and it doesn't matter because we don't have anything the next day, and.
Right.
I'm literally in a place 7 years later where I can't play Last of Us 2 because I'm busy until August. I have to plan out my schedule of when I'm going to be able to sit down and play a video game with my friend because because of COVID reasons and When Night Stands Fast, the show I'm working on reasons, I can't do I can't do that. I can't sit down and play it with my friend who I want to play it with until August.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely an association of I love this game and it's great on its own merits, but it has a special place in my heart because it's from a time when one of the last times in my life I was able to do that.
Right.
Sorry.
And what about you, Blair? Because you're a little bit older than me and Nick, so you were at probably a different point in your life when you kind of experienced this game.
Yeah, I was definitely at a different point in my life. I was like 15, 16 when I experienced the game, and it resonates, especially the ending, because I remember thinking about the game for days and just appreciating that it really made me think. Because I wasn't like the most popular kid or hanging out with the most people, so I really found solace in art, and I think shows like Adventure Time and say what you want about Odd Future, but that really got me through high school, and I think Last of Us was one of those things where I really engaged myself in it and felt like it was really substantive. So there's this sense of gratitude that I have
Mm-hmm.
for the game for making me feel the way that it did. Because I feel like it's experiences like those and questioning, what something says and what it means for me. Those are the moments that help me grow. So I think Last of Us and experiencing a narrative like that in the form of a video game was like this tiny little learning experience along the way. So I really appreciate it.
Hmm.
I
Yeah, for me, I don't really have much of an emotional connection to it. I mean, aside from the time that I played it and when I started it, how I started it, the circumstances of all that, and I remember playing it after you and our roommate Brady had left and moved everything out of the apartment for our winter break. And I remember playing it in an empty apartment before having to pack everything up and go. And that's really my biggest memory with it, and that and beating Last of Us and Halo Combat Evolved in the same day.
Two perfect games.
But yeah, I think that's that magical attachment, at least for a lot of games now, a lot of amazing spectacular games that I've been playing these days is kind of lost on me. I can't really figure out why Cinnamon Toast Crunch tastes so good. Is because I played it as not a fully formed adult, and I don't think I ever will be at this rate if I'm talking about video games at 20. But
Good luck.
Dude, I hope I'm never a fully formed adult.
me neither. Me fucking neither. That sounds boring. But I think that I kind of didn't really have a chance to have that kind of connection to it for that reason. like I said, games like Black Ops 2, which we've done an episode about, plug, go check that out. Um, Black Ops 2, or like any of the Smash games, stuff like that, where it's like I have such visceral memories of, like coming home from school and playing those or whatever, or like setting aside time to play it with friends. And I didn't really have that with Last of Us. Like Nick, obviously, I have fond memories of sitting there and making fun of the game while you were there, watching me be angry. And but aside from that, I kind of never really had like a thing to tie it to, I guess.
That being said, I do think you alone in the apartment after your two roommates have left for Christmas as you're playing this deeply depressing, bittersweet game is kind of a beautiful image.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, I'm sorry. I know we're reading tweets and experiences. I did have a thought that I wanted to share in terms of an actual writing and storytelling point of view. If you are interested, anyone listening, if you're interested at all in, screenwriting, storytelling, I think that the third act of Last of Us, if you wanted to look at it in terms of like a movie, everything at the hospital at the end of Last of Us is a brilliant third act in terms of traditional structure and how to end a movie like this, where Joel, your protagonist, is presented with a crisis that is two irreconcilable goods, right? He can either let Ellie die and potentially save the world. That's good. Or he can do the selfish thing and kill them and save Ellie, and then he has a daughter again, which is also good for the protagonist. And it's an incredibly difficult choice. Like, you can only choose one, you can never go back from it, and it's an impossible choice to make. And he makes one that is in-fitting with his character, and you're then presented with an ending that is completely and utterly bittersweet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you're completely, like, and it makes you reconsider everything that came before. It really makes you, well, not like reconsider the nature of the actions because the journey was the point, but just like it makes you really think about this whole journey itself was based off of the principle that these people put themselves in this situation. Like, I know there are a lot of Joel apologists out there in terms of just the straight moral nature of the decision that he made. And what they like to say is, oh, there's no guarantee that the fireflies would have made a serum. There's no guarantee. How does he know 100% that they would have saved the world? Like, did he need 100% guarantee?
Yeah, the point is you have to try, right? And he doesn't.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm pretty sure Joel has a line, or maybe Ellie does, in the game where they basically say, like, in order to get through this, you just always have to try. Like, you just have to hope it'll be better.
You cut out, so I'm not sure if you're still.
I'm still. I was, but it's okay. We can move on. It's okay. It was nothing important.
Oh, my bad.
He says about his entire hour-long recording. It was nothing.
No, I mean, again, like this is good. Probably like after editing, it's probably gonna end up being an hour and a half because I have one more memory to do. Not yet, but it's a fucking doozy.
Right.
Oh, ready.
But so Nick, talking about kind of the repercussions of the third act.
Big words.
And knowing now that there is a sequel. How do you think, or like, what do you want to see in the sequel in terms of the in terms of the end of the game? Because I think the end of the game is the biggest thing that sets up any real tension for a sequel, if that makes sense.
Well, I think the obvious thing a lot of people would point to, and a lot of people I'm sure were expecting, is the big elephant in the room is, does Ellie ever learn the truth? Mm-hmm. And honestly, I don't think that's the biggest thing set up, because my interpretation of the ending in recent years has genuinely been that Ellie knows he's lying.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think having not played Last of Us 2, again, I literally know nothing that happens in it, so I have no idea if what I'm just saying is just what happens. But I think Ellie knows he's lying, and she's genuinely testing him. Like, something feels off. She doesn't buy his bullshit excuse. She's kind of piecing together what happened, and she's like, I have to just ask him to know if I can trust this person, right? And she asks him, and he lies, and I think she knows that he lies. So I think it's less about that, and maybe there is a scene where they confront it, because hearing him actually admit to it is different than her suspecting it, obviously. But I think in terms of a sequel, it really is, and I think they did the right thing from what I've seen, is that it should absolutely be a game about Ellie more than Joel, because I think Joel's story is essentially fully complete, and anything left he has to do would be directly related to Ellie's journey and not his own. Because I think his arc is complete in a way that is satisfying and...
You cut out again.
I was saying that Joel, I think Joel's arc at the end of the first game is complete in a way that is satisfying, and anything to do with him going forward would serve better in the service of Ellie's character progression and not necessarily towards his own.
Right.
Which is why the game should be about Ellie, and I'm glad that they did that. I would also say that a lot of it is about if Ellie realizes that she was part of a situation where it could have helped the world. She could have helped the world and didn't because of someone else. She would have a complex where she would be trying to make reparations or make as many things right as she can, and I think she would forever be guilty about that situation, even if it's not her fault.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted.
All right, I want to segue out of there before Blair or I say anything, because we both have. Well, Blair knows the whole story. I don't know the whole story, but I know most of it at this point for the second game.
Anyway, I'm just saying that I'm a writer, and so I think about these things sometimes or something. I don't know if any of that was right or if all of it was right, and if it was, I'm just saying I write things for a living sometimes. I'm just
When Night Stands Fast, coming out soon. There's going to be a trailer soon. We're going to plug it. But
Dude,
just
so
When
excited.
Night Stands Fast.
I'm so excited.
So we have one final take, and as I said earlier, it was a doozy.
Yeah.
When I asked Twitter for their takes, their opinions, their memories, my friend Gian95 ex Kano said, "I have so much to say. I could talk about this for an hour." And I told him to DM me because he said there weren't enough characters to contain in a tweet, and he wasn't kidding. So I'm just gonna read, and I'm kidding. I obviously this show is about media that people love and are passionate about. So seeing people express that passion and that love is
passion,
it's paramount to this show.
Passion and love. I'm ready to vehemently disagree with something.
Oh yeah, Nick's so good at that.
All right. So, people hate to overly praise things, but I'll say it. There were great things before Last of Us, that's a given. There were many games better than Last of Us before it came out, but I 100% believe that Last of Us changed the video game industry in a big way. Last of Us truly ended the stigma that lots of people had that games weren't art. So many people looked at games differently after that. Game developers started taking their stories more seriously, which is why we have a lot more dad games, and dad games is in quotes, but that's why. It was massive. A recent example is God of War. God of War before Last of Us was God of War before Last of Us was amazing, don't get me wrong, but you can tell Santa Monica was inspired heavily by Last of Us. The way a story can be told seriously and have heavy moments, the characters can be fleshed out so well through gameplay. These are new things, of course, but Last of Us did it so naturally. It felt like... These aren't new things, rather. These aren't new things, of course, but Last of Us did it so naturally it felt like watching a movie or TV show in a good way. And now God of War has changed it and become one of the best PlayStation exclusives, even winning Game of the Year. Now onto the game itself. Visually, amazing. The gameplay, fantastic. Really made you want to search every inch of every area you were in to craft that next upgrade. And all the areas were pretty, so that it made it better. And all the areas were pretty, so that made it better. Plus, you'd find notes and letters from people who lived in houses, and it wasn't like most games where the notes and letters provided info on the main story. Some of it was just how certain people lived. Really set the tone of everything in a way I really appreciated. Made it more real, more sad. The fact that in this zombie game, enemy vision was not important so long as you were the slick and a nice so long as you were slick was a nice touch, made better by the fact that oh my god, the fact that in this zombie game, enemy vision was not important so long as you were slick was a nice touch, made better by the fact that there would also be humans mixed in who could hear but also see made you approach everything in a ever-changing way, I think is what that says. But onto its obvious strong point. The Last of Us shined in its story and its characters, who were made 100,000 times better with amazing voice acting and facial expressions. I always remember exactly how Joel or Ellie said certain lines back in ways that would break my heart or make me smile. Looking back, the overall story was predictable, but it was natural. It was the natural way it was told that kept people invested and made them fall in love with the story and characters. When you know how a story is going to end, but still love every second of the story, even the ending, you've made a great story. Not necessarily a groundbreaking new one, but a good one.
Yeah, I mean,
Very well read, may I say.
that goes with a lot of what we were saying, and one of my points was earlier that it's not that it's the most original, it's that it's just so good at doing what it does. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if I've seen a lot of the scenes from Last of Us and other things. It's that I think it does them the best, or at least Mount Rushmore style.
And yeah, there was a great point in there that it made video games be looked at differently. There are games that were great story wise before. There were games that attempted to be cinematic, like Metal Gear Solid is a thing, you know. But it was Last of Us that stood as that thing that made everybody say like, "Oh, holy shit! This thing was pretty good, and it did this. Let's see what we can take from this." Because not every piece of art gets popular and praised to the point where people say, "What can we take from this to make us more successful?" I want to know Nick's perspective on kind of like the story within the story of like the world, these different factions. Because I think, and I definitely want to know what you think of the same aspects in the second game when you play it. But what do you think about this game and kind of like the Fireflies, the Fedra, and all of these different things?
Like what they are, or how the
How that
game
works, how the
handles
story
them.
works. Yeah, how they handle it.
I think I think the game does a really good job of naturally setting up all of them at the beginning and only having them come up in instances where it matters. Like it sets them up to a point where it's like, yep, these things exist and you might come across them, but it never takes away from Joel or Ellie in a way that a lot of other stories tend to do when they get too involved with what their worlds are like. Like it is genuinely shocking to play a game about like a dystopia apocalypse and not be constantly walking by radios or overhearing people talk about the latest political drama within like the military's whatever, or how the fireflies are doing. It feels like they only show up at really important and integral moments and times. But also
Right.
they're so part of the story from the very beginning. And it never feels like they're not part of it, even when they genuinely aren't.
Exactly.
That's what I would say to Blair's question. That
Very well answered.
for some reason he wanted me, of all people in the world, to answer.
So, one other thing from Shen's kind of
Diatribe.
tirade, diatribe. Tirade sounds so negative.
Diatribe's a good one.
From his diatribe, one thing that stood out to me was kind of that it kind of solidified games as art, and I'm curious to hear what you both think, because I'm in a very different position from you both in some ways, in other ways not. Like I'm genuinely
I
so exhausted
by this
about
conversation.
hearing about things that prove that video games are
So-
art. It's so like I don't think like I've seen this so much on Twitter and so much in like reviews and comments and everything, and people talking about specifically Last of Us Part 2, but other games in general, and about how video games are art and this game proves it, this game doesn't
Right.
prove it. And well, I agree that it did an important job of like helping to solidify that thought in the public mindset. I think games have always been art, but also that trying to define art and say that every single video game is a work of art on the same level in the same way as something else is disingenuous to the medium, because unlike film or music, it doesn't always have to be the same linear experience every time you go through it.
I do have a take on this. I think I know what they were trying to say when they said solidified Last of Us as art, and I'm on the same side as you, Charlie, in that I just think video games are just like movies and TV and other things. They're just a new medium of ways to experience something, to be entertained. Because at the end of the day, that's all TV and movies and books are. It's just entertainment. Mm-hmm. Like, you can apply any value you want to it, and I love to do so. I love analyzing things and looking into them and being moved by things. But it is entertainment. Like, very, very baseline is what it is. You're being entertained by something. You're doing something to take up your time. And because of that, I think all games are art, and I don't think that a story or no story makes something. I think Super Mario's art and The Last of Us is also art because it is someone had to make that thing. Someone or a team of
someone had to draw this. Someone had to compose this. Someone had to act for this.
Someone, either a team of people or even sometimes one person had to put in the effort and make this thing. But I also think that why I'm so tired of this conversation is because I don't think it matters whether they are or not, because again, it's just entertainment, and you can apply however much or however little value to it that you want. And I think what the person's saying when they say solidified as art is Last of Us was incredibly popular. It was literally.
Sorry. I want to clarify. I meant when I said solidified as art, I'm saying they ended that stigma with other people, like not necessarily like solidified it as a pretty one singular piece to one artwork to rule them all.
Right. What I'm saying is Last of Us was super popular. It was everywhere. A lot of people knew about it. Like, I feel like my parents knew about it. Is how everywhere it was in terms of on TV. There were billboards for Last of Us. Like, it was everywhere. And I think what helped with Last of Us in terms of the games are art conversation is Last of Us is so much like movies and TV that it's easy to point to it and go, see, look at this, TV and movies, the thing you're familiar with. Video games can be just like that too.
Yeah, I think it's a little disingenuous, the entire conversation it has been for a long time, because if something is like curated, crafted, presented to you, and especially if something is interactable the way video games are, to say that isn't on some level art is, to me, it's just it's pretentious. It's like you're looking down on something and saying even the word entertainment is a little bit presumptuous. Like, not everything needs to be made to be a light in front of your face to be fun. Like, games have to be fun. Like, yeah, games should be fun depending on who you ask, but do games have to be fun?
Don't ask Neil Druckmann.
Games are experiences. Honestly, I don't know. I feel like I've played games before that I wouldn't necessarily qualify as fun, but I would recommend and I enjoyed. In the same way that I don't think every movie I've ever liked I've liked because it was fun.
Yeah. Like,
if you've seen Room starring Brie Larson, that movie's not fun at all, but it's amazing. I just think that here's my take. I love video games, and I think the second that you're trying to be like, this thing is lesser than this other thing, you're wasting your time more than I'm wasting my time, because I need to feel like I have some amount of value to my time. It's not a conversation I'm interested in, because it just feels judgmental at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it to me it spawns from like this. I heard someone talking about it, how it had like some kind of origin in like the comic book community, where it was like, people growing up with comic books and then like having their parents be like, oh, that's not really reading, or that's not a real book or whatever, and then them having this need to defend whatever they do as something that's worthwhile.
I mean, people hated radio.
And I think that's the same kind of situation. A lot of people from our generation have parents who just barely missed that gap of like games being something that's like a massive worldwide phenomenon when they were kids, so they never really had much of a chance to like interact with that as a trend.
I mean, people
For it to seem worthwhile.
Radio. I mean, people hated the radio
Yeah.
when it came out. People were like, "This is a terrible thing, a waste of time. It's gonna distract all of us." And then people accepted it, and then TV came out, and people were like, "TV is terrible. Just use your radio, God." And then video games came out, and people were like, "Video games will corrupt your mind. Just watch TV all day." So it's an endless cycle. Like it's just we get so stuck in things. We associate things too strongly with what we want them to be or what they should be, and new things are bad. I think it's not fun to live like that. Just
Yeah, I think that's why Quibi is going to be like a huge thing.
uh-huh.
Right now we're saying it's bad.
Yeah, sure, Blair.
It's still art?
It is. No, I never said it wasn't art, but it's not art I'm interested in making, or even
All right,
experiencing.
well, we're talking about Quibi, so I think that says all that you need to know about how much we've exhausted this masterpiece of a video game as a conversation topic. So now's the part of the show where you both get to plug everything and anything that you are working on specifically on the internet, or I guess elsewhere too. Blair?
I have a Twitter. It's Blair for Thought, BlairForThou. It's Thought. That's my thing. I mean, I'm working on a project that's gonna be going through a funding campaign like next month. It's called Bookstore. It's a show. It's gonna be happening. So maybe look it up, and it might exist by then. But other than that, I tweet. And I exist, my dude. So I know Nick has a lot going on. So.
I exist, my dude.
And correct me if I'm mistaken, and I can edit this out if you don't want this out there, but you also are a recording artist.
My SoundCloud is too crappy to share, so yeah.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
Blair, drop that shit. Share it.
It's like rudimentary songs.
Share it.
Okay, if you want to listen to some songs that are kind of rough, but I kind of like them sometimes, it's Blair Johnson on SoundCloud, Blair Johnson, Johnsson on SoundCloud. Listen to some bars, have some fun.
Love
All right, and Nick?
Well, first, if you at all enjoyed any rambling, incoherent response I gave to anything Charlie said today, my Twitter is at Nick Borelli 2. That's NickBorelli 2. And I normally tweet the same things that I would just say to Charlie if I was in the room with him, but to the world. And the other thing I'll promote is I've been working on a TV show called When Night Stands Fast for 2 years now. Charlie, when is this episode going up?
Friday.
This Friday? All right. Well, I guess if anyone listens to this, they'll get an early scoop. My show is coming out on Amazon Prime on August 14th. So, if you're at all interested, I wrote and directed and produced a TV show for the past 2 years, and it's coming out August 14th on Amazon Prime called When Night Stands Fast.
And it's good.
And also, I'm going to interject here. If you do find yourself in the moral conundrum of supporting Amazon via Amazon Prime, you can also go stream Nick's movie, Bostrom, which is also on Amazon Prime.
True.
It's spelled like Boston, but not.
It's Boston,
And,
but there's an R after the T and an M instead of an N.
So for those of you who can't do puzzles, that's Bostrom.
Bostrom is a movie I made in my senior year of high school because we had nothing to do senior spring. So I wrote and directed a movie. It's a time, There's plenty I've learned since, but it's a time. Charlie enjoyed it, so if you like,
I like it.
If you like Charlie,
And then also Blair, like if you feel like there's like a project that you've done that you want to plug too, just like let me know.
Yeah, of course.
Like, feel free to interject. But and then you can all find me on Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram at CHAS_MKE. That's Chaz Milwaukee. You can also find me on YouTube at just Chaz, CHAS. I'm sure some of you are already listening on YouTube. And if you are listening on YouTube, please go and check out the podcast on other audio services and follow or subscribe there. It helps me out, not just because it makes me feel good, but also because it gives me a better understanding of, you know, what you all are responding to and what episodes you are and aren't listening to. And it also if you're listening on an audio platform, you can also find these in video format on YouTube. Nothing's being filmed. It's literally just a thumbnail that I make.
You okay over there? You okay over there?
You doing good, my dude?
No, I'm like having bubbles because I had a press.
Oh, what?
What else do I have to plug? Oh yeah, you can also as of like a little bit ago, you can find my work over at DualShockers. That's dualshockers.com, the video games website. Currently, I just put up a preview for a game called No Straight Roads, where I had opinions on it, so go read that. Anyways, thank you all very much for watching. Make sure to follow on whatever audio platforms you're listening on, and please, 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 be nice to all the essential workers and people in your life. Peace out.